introduce you to the components that make the city budget, talk about some of the challenges that we face here in this city, and it happens in cities all across New York State, and really be able to allow you after that to be able to interact with us. So you'll see around the room, we have tables set up here, and we have many of our department heads and senior staff from various departments where we're going to have an opportunity to break out when we're done with John's presentation to truly be able to get your feedback about where you would like to see the City of Kingston spend its dollars, how you think we can overcome some of these challenges, and we have some questions that we'll pose to you later on that will hopefully help guide this discussion tonight. But for me, it's important for this process to occur. I believe it's important for us to be able to get as much information from the public as possible so that this budget truly not only reflects the mayor and his staff, but also the people that I represent. And we're going to be able to then give a budget to the Common Council that has had ample public involvement. And not only are we going to do this involvement here tonight, but we will be going ahead and providing a survey out to the public on our website that folks will be able to comment on and be able to share their thoughts. We're going to post this presentation, and I think we'll truly be able to get some good feedback. And so with that said, I'm going to turn this over to John Tuey, who's going to give us a presentation this evening.
Thank you. Is this on?
No, it doesn't sound like it.
Are we on yet?
Should work.
Was it on for you?
No, you said the booming voice.
Yeah.
Mayor had the booming voice. Well, we can work without it. That's fine.
That's not, yeah, that's,
That's fine. Well, thank you. As the mayor mentioned, tonight what we're going to do is walk you through the nuts and bolts, not on a real detailed basis, but an overview of the city budget, what makes it up, the major revenue items, major expense items. Spend a lot of time on some of the challenges that we face in crafting the city budget. It's the first opportunity I've had to do a community forum since I've been here at the city. I think it's a great opportunity to get public input. We talk a lot of the verbiage that we'll talk about, you've heard in the public, you've read in the paper. For some of you, this might be the first time you actually see some of the detail behind it, and I'll explain it as we go. So why are we here? Key challenges. One of the reasons we're here is we've identified some key challenges for next year's budget and budgets going forward. Really looking for community input on some of these, and we want to educate you on some of these challenges. Moving down the line, the first one, minimizing future property tax increases. The city's been fortunate in recent years. We haven't had any large increases. The last few years, we've also maintained compliance with the New York State tax cap. The city, since its inception, has not overridden the New York State tax cap. That has become increasingly more difficult. For those of you who are familiar with the calculation, the tax cap is based upon a rate of inflation, and that tax cap number has declined each year for the last few years. I'll show you a little more information on that in more slides. Limited growth in the tax base. This relates to the assessed role in actual development that's going on in the city of Kingston. We have more detail on that, but we're seeing it, that's been leveled for the last few years, the assessed role. Growing infrastructure needs, I think everyone sees it. We've had the Washington Avenue sinkhole, we've had a lot of large capital projects. Creates a real strain on the budget, and it's increased our debt service. Unfunded mandates, I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Stagnant state aid, it's been several years now since we've seen an increase in our state aid. Explore opportunities to reduce costs. This has been an ongoing project for the city every year. During budget time and outside of budget time, we're work vigorously to find opportunities to reduce costs. and this is a key area where we're seeking public input. And the last item, growth in non-tax revenues may be necessary to maintain full array of services provided to the public. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. New York State tax cap. It's not a set 2% tax cap. We hear it referred to in the papers as a 2% tax cap. It's actually significantly less than a 2% tax cap in an environment where the inflation rate is less than 2%. The city's 2017 tax cap would be approximately 1% when all factors are considered. Based upon our $17.7 million tax levy, that gives us approximately $200,000 to work with in next year's budget. That's the number we're working with. And that would limit city increase in spending by only $200,000 or less than 0.5% without tapping into the reserves or finding new revenue sources. A part of earlier I just mentioned the change in the tax base. And this is a slide that illustrates that item. Part of the New York State tax cap is a calculation that adjusts for tax-based growth. So this is real quantitative changes in the city's assessed role. This is new development. This is increases to existing development. These numbers could have a huge impact on the city's tax cap and would enable the city to allocate some of these taxes to new development to offset a lot of the fixed costs that we bear no matter what the change in growth is. And what this chart here shows, the growth factor has been under 1% essentially every single year since the inception of the tax cap. In some years it's been almost zero. In 2014 it was roughly 10.1%. And in 2017 it's going to be under 0.4%.
Can we afford a clicker? Is that part of the budget?
It's not in the budget. Another illustration of the lack of growth in the city that causes a budgetary issue is these are the sewer units built. And it seems like an innocuous question, sewer units built. Why are we even bringing that up here? A great deal of the sewer costs are fixed costs. The more users you have, the more costs you have to allocate, the more that you can keep the sewer rate down. And what we're actually seeing is a decline in sewer usage. 2012, we were over 800,000 units of sewer used. 2016, we're at 770,000. It's not dramatic, but with all the sewer work that we have going on right now, it's not allowing us to spread those costs out. And new development would help with that. Wrong direction. I mentioned infrastructure challenges. Here it is on paper, some of the larger projects that we've either recently completed or are ongoing. Washington Avenue Sanitary and Stormwater Tunnel, $7.5 million. The current project, sewer project, Broadway Grand Street, is nearly $2 million. Treatment plant upgrades, $2.4 million. Greenville Avenue Bridge construction, $3.7 million. The Andy Murphy Midtown Neighborhood Center, $1.3 million. And Uptown Parking Lot, $800,000. It's a lot of projects. Any point in time, the city has approximately $25 million in capital projects that are ongoing. Over the last 5 years, these projects, although there are grant monies in some cases to help reduce these costs, it has created a strain on the budget. Despite the city's strong bond rating, we've seen an increase in our long-term and short-term debt by nearly $5 million. And the annual debt service budget has increased by nearly $140,000, or an average of $140,000 per year. So each year, I talked before when I mentioned the tax cap, that for 2017 we have $200,000 to work with. This screen illustrates that nearly $140,000 of that is already accounted for. It's in the ground. It's capital projects. It's in the ground. It's on the buildings. It's in the parks. It's in the parking lots. But that's nearly 3/4 of your tax cap right there. State mandates. This is a word that gets thrown around a lot. You hear it from your local government leaders. You've heard it from the city of Kingston. State mandates come in many shapes and sizes. Typically, they're thought of as statutory or regulatory provisions that require local government to deliver service without providing the funding to go along with it. These types of mandates are perhaps the easiest to identify and quantify, but it's important to note that mandates can take other forms as well. Many mandates do not necessarily require local governments to provide a particular service, but they place restrictions or impose requirements on the way municipalities operate or how a particular service is delivered. Frequently, these mandates limit flexibility, forcing local leaders to be less efficient and cost-effective than they otherwise would. Finally, state mandates can limit a municipality's ability to raise revenue by restricting the fines, fees, and taxes that may be levied at the local level. In less words, essentially, what the mandates are restrictions on how we can raise revenue, and are also where the city is forced to take on projects or deliver services in a certain way where we have no say in an increased cost. There's a website here you should take a look at that time. It's www.stopthetaxshift.org. It lists dozens of mandates that have an impact on budgets, such as the city of Kingston's. Megan is handing out a little quick snapshot of several mandates that I thought might be illustrative for you to get an understanding of when what we're talking about when we're talking about mandates. The first one is the inability to recoup costs for municipal services provided in tax-exempt properties. There's a state mandate where the city cannot recoup costs for fire and police protection from tax-exempt properties. Some of you know that, some of you don't, but that's a state mandate that reduces revenue sources for the city of Kingston and cities and states, or cities, towns, counties across the state. A disparity in charges for vital records is another state mandate. It's innocuous, it's a small mandate, doesn't really seem like much, but this item limits the amount that the city can charge for birth and death certificates to $10. $10 per certificate. For some odd reason, there's certain municipalities have been grandfathered into being able to charge $30 per birth and death certificate. $10 doesn't seem like much money, and it's certainly not enough to cover the cost of doing business. But once again, this is a state mandate. The city were able to raise its fee to the $30, as some municipalities are already able to under state law. It could be another $100,000 of revenue that's being paid by those individuals who are using those services, not the general taxpayers. And the last item is a limitation on municipal deposit options. Another innocuous one most people aren't aware of, but as a city government, we're limited on where we can invest public money. We have to deal with commercial banks. We can't deal with savings banks, we can't deal with credit unions, where you can put your personal money and get better interest rates. We're locked into commercial banks where right now our interest rates are horrible. And we bid those deposits out, but we're very limited in what we can do with them. So this is another idea or example of a state mandate where the state mandates to the city and other local governments how you have to handle your investments. But there's no offset in terms of revenue to compensate us for the lack of interest revenue. Where does your tax money go? That was me scratching my head. I thought it'd be helpful for everyone to see an allocation of your property tax dollars. Not everyone breaks down their bills, but we have for you. In the city of Kingston taxpayer, if you're a residential taxpayer, 28% of your overall tax bill is for city services, is to the city of Kingston. 12% goes to the county, 1% to the library, 59% to the school. Commercial is similar but slightly different. 33% to the city, 8% to the county, 2% to the library, 57% to the school. the distinction between those two is primarily because the county has, they do not have a homestead, non-homestead tax rate, where the city and the school both have a different tax structure for residential and commercial. The county has a flat tax structure. Also thought it'd be helpful, of that 28% of your tax dollars go to the city, we thought it'd be helpful for you to see actually where that money is spent on the city budget. Because not everyone gets to see this. This is the first time we've really broken it down this way. On $150,000 assessed residents, you would pay $1,524 in city tax. That's how much, that's the portion of your city tax that comes here and pays for the various services that you provide, or that the city provides: police, fire, public works, recreation, debt service. That number is there for you. General government is essentially all the departments that are not listed separately. It's mainly City Hall. It's everything from finance to planning to legal to engineering. The civil service office, the city clerk, the registrar, that's a whole host of services combined in one number. As we're putting this together, I found it interesting that the recreation department number, $75, kind of stood out to me. That's what you pay on a $150,000 tax bill for all the city park use that you get. And also, another interesting number was the public works department. $297 is what the average city resident has $150,000 assessed value to pay for their public works. For those people who live outside the city of Kingston and don't have trash pickup, you're probably paying a lot more than that per year. But the city of Kingston's less than $300 for your public works department. Yeah, you might just want to almost stand it. This one here, sorry.
This one. I need extras.
This one here is just another breakdown of the total spending for the city. Nearly half of the city spending is public safety, almost 27% for police, 21% for fire department. Public works department comes in at just under 20%. General government is just over 10%. You can see the rest of the numbers there. And we have further information if you want it or need it after the presentation. This is a breakdown from a different perspective. This is where the type of expense that the city incurs. Salaries are almost 43%. Employee benefits are just over a third, or just nearly a third of our budget. Debt service, as I talked about before, the increasing infrastructure demands, that number keeps ticking upwards. That's over 6%. The contractual expenses really is everything else, and we'll get into that in a second. That's almost 18%. But as you can see, the salaries and benefits are over 75% of the city budget, and a lot of that's contractually mandated. And a big piece that the city can work with is the contractual expenses. That's just under the 18%. Obviously, we deal with the salaries and benefits portion of it through our collective bargaining processes. The contractual expenses, ongoing management, the city's been pretty successful in limiting growth in that. All right.
That's fine.
Thanks.
Unless you guys don't mind jumping in.
Here's another breakdown just of the salary budget. Of salaries, I mentioned that over 43% of the budget was salaries. Here's a breakdown of where the salaries are. As you can see, the majority is public safety. We have a healthy amount of public works, recreation is over $1 million. General government is $1.8 million. On the benefit costs, we mentioned employee benefits are over a third of the city budget, and this is how that money is spent. The vast majority of it is medical insurance and state retirement. Some other pieces, Social Security, and then the other is everything from clothing allowances, uniform, things like that. Those are a very small percentage. And the city recently appointed a health insurance broker from the result of an open competitive RFP, working with the mayor's office and the civil service department to try to find a way to deliver health insurance to our city employees in a more cost-effective manner and to continue to provide them the same level of coverage. And that's a challenge that we have every year. This is the first time that the health insurance broker has been selected from an RFP process, so I'm excited about it. And we've already we're in the process of forming a committee to explore this. And it would be a collaborative management employee working group to look at the health insurance. I mentioned a few minutes ago the contractual expenses. This is everything outside of the salaries, benefits, debt service. It's always interesting to get the question of, well, where is that money spent? What can we do with that number? And this is the first time since I've been here we've broken it down in quite this fashion. But this shows you where that money's spent or how it's spent. The lion's share of it is in insurance and claims. That's workers' comp insurance, that's liability insurance, those are mandatory items. Utility costs, which we've done a lot to reduce, but that's still the second largest item on the list. Tipping fees for trash pickup, talked about a few minutes ago. And then it just trickles down the line with no other item being over really $600,000 a year. Materials, supplies, which is just the cost of doing business. Employees, the departments need materials, particularly public works need materials to work with to maintain. Contracted services, property maintenance, we have to maintain our properties. Contingency is basically a reserve account within the operating budget. Vehicle fuel, we purchase vehicle fuel off the state contract, we manage that well. Service contracts under contractual equipment rental, and that's in a snapshot of where your city spending is. That's me again. It's budget time. We thought it would be helpful for everyone to see a breakdown of where city revenue is generated from. As you'll see, the two largest items are property taxes and sales tax. It makes up nearly 75% of the city revenue budget. State aid is nearly $4 million. And then once you get past those items, you have a sliver, roughly a quarter of the budget, which is made up of all other revenue sources. Other revenue, sales surplus property, federal aid, which is not ticking upwards, nor is state aid. Fund balance, which is what we use to balance the budget each year. Other non-property taxes, that's pilot agreements. That is franchise taxes through Time Warner, and it's gross receipts taxes. And that's basically fixed items that we can't change. Those are either negotiated with utility companies or they're state mandated revenue items. Then you also have reimbursed costs where the city is actually reimbursed for over $1.5 million of our expenses. One item on there is a contract we have with the school to provide safety officers to the school. That's an example of a reimbursed cost. Then you have fines, penalties, and fees, or I'm sorry, fines, penalties, and interest. Not really how well. And then user charges and fees, $1.25 million. Is that piece right there, the yellow piece, that's the fees that users of government services and outside of property taxes are paying for services provided by the city, and that's inclusive of all departments. Public works, that's parking fees, that's recreation, that's building and zoning, that's the whole nutshell. So that alone is roughly 3% of the city budget. I mentioned New York State aid is flat. One of our challenges, so it would be funny to show five years of no increase. There it is. It illustrates that we've been held to the same level for the last 5 years. So in face of state mandates, we're not getting any additional state aid. I mean, we continue to get grants from the state for different projects, but in terms of operating aid or operating budget, it's flat. It's not increasing. Our expenses continue to go up, but any aid from outside sources is not. Mentioned user fees before. $1.25 million, it's only 3% of our revenue budget. User fees are really a way for governments to allocate the cost of services provided to the users of those services rather than the general tax base. For an example, in this case, parking revenue is over $250,000. That revenue is generated by those individuals using our parking facilities. That revenue generated in that department offsets the general taxes paid by everyone else, and some of those general taxpayers don't use these parking facilities. So this is a way to allocate the cost of services provided to the users of those facilities. I find it interesting, for example, Department of Public Works, all the services that are provided by the Department of Public Works, only $100,000 in service fees for that department. Recreation is just under $300,000. And I say fire/building safety, it's really building and safety that generates those fees. And I have to say, in all of these examples, with the possible exception of parking, and there's a little more involved with that, but in all of these examples, the fees generated do not nearly cover the cost of services provided. The recreation fee of $250,000, the salaries alone in that department are $1 million. So this is the offset that we have to that. Yeah, there's some grants and other funding sources, but the users of those facilities aren't paying a great deal towards the overall cost for that department. So the questions for consideration. What are your budget priorities for the city? It's kind of left with a pie that everyone wants low property taxes. We want to maintain our existing services, improvement of existing services, and we want to be able to offer new services. We're asking for community input. What is your priority? How do you envision, if you could rate those items, how would you rate them? What are your thoughts on the role that user fees and other non-tax revenue sources should have in the city budget? As I mentioned before, user fees are a way that user fees can offset property tax increases and more equitably allocate the cost of those services to those individuals who are using those services. What service programs and functions of city government do you consider high priorities for the future? And what ideas do you have to improve the quality and cost efficiency of city services programs and functions? And there's going to be, maybe you want to add, there's going to be a poll on the city website. We're asking for public input in that area.
Tally goes tomorrow.
I'm going to turn over to Megan to span everybody out to the tables.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. I'm relatively new to working for the City of Kingston. My name is Megan Weisrow. I'm the Director of Communications and Community Engagement. And so, first of all, I just want to thank you all for coming out today. And we hope that you continue to spread the word, because this is not a one-time event. This is the first of really what our vision is, what the administration's vision is, which is to make sure that the services that we're providing, that the government that we have, remembers that we work for you. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. And so what's going to happen next is that we have these different tables set up, and everything here is pretty flexible. We have to be flexible in order to get stuff done. And so we have representation from nearly all of our departments. And first of all, I just want to thank all of you from our city departments. We're also able to make your schedules available to come here. And so we have broken up into 5 different sections. We have the police department, the fire department, the Department of Public Works, the Parks and Recreation Department, and City Hall General Government. And so what we'd ask is that we're going to have different employees, the leadership of those departments at these different tables. And so we welcome you, we encourage you, and we also ask you to come visit each of the tables and look at these questions. And you can think about from the bigger picture, where you can think about each of those departments, and we're asking you to help us find some answers here. We're asking you to think about, from your perspective, what are these priorities? And so we welcome you to do that. I would ask that all the city department leadership, if you want to span around to your different areas, that would be great. This is a time, probably one of the first times, or at least one of the first times we can have direct contact with the department heads. If you have questions try to answer them. If we don't have the answer, we'll get those answers quickly. So please join us. And then in a few minutes, we're going to for a little while, and then afterwards we'll just do a little roundup. The mayor and our John Tuey are going to be rotating and listening in. So